Hi, so welcome to this episode of History Hunters. I'm in the Austin Memorial Park. It's a cemetery in Austin, Texas, state capital. I'm here to find a couple of celebrity graves. The first two that I want to find are Texas Rangers named Maney Gault and his partner Frank Hamer. Those two helped lead the manhunt for Bonnie and Clyde and ultimately killed them in Louisiana. And I'm going to visit their graves. They're right here. Right over there, across the street, I think that's Hanford Street, is a little strip mall here on the west side of Austin. And here is the legendary Frank Hamer. He was born in 1884 and he died in 1955. Somebody's left a New York Police Department Manhattan emblem. We've got an emblem here from the class of 2010, New York Police Academy. There's the state of Texas, Jamestown Police Reunion emblem. There's some quarters up there, some bullets. These haven't been fired. A bunch of police obviously come up here and pay homage. Over here we have bicycle patrol, Texas Highway Patrol trooper. Bonnie Elizabeth Parker and Clyde Barrow were the notorious criminal couple who traveled the central United States with their gang during the Great Depression. The couple was known for their bank robberies, though they preferred to rob small stores or rural funeral homes. Their exploits captured the attention of the American press and its readership between 1931 and 1934, until the couple was ambushed and shot to death in Louisiana. They are believed to have murdered at least 9 police officers and 4 civilians. Clyde was born into a poor Texas family in 1909, and by the age of 17 he was starting his life of crime, stealing and robbing. It's believed that he met Bonnie Parker on January 5, 1930 in Dallas. He was 20 years old and she was 19. After falling for each other, Parker remained his loyal companion as they carried out many crimes and awaited the violent death that they viewed as inevitable. The Texas Department of Corrections contacted the former Texas Ranger Captain Frank Hamer and persuaded him to hunt down the Barrow gang. He was retired, but his commission had not expired. He accepted the task as a Texas Highway Patrol officer. Hamer was tall, burly, and taciturn, and for 20 years he had been feared and admired throughout Texas as the walking embodiment of the Texas Rangers' ethos. He had a reputation as a result of several spectacular captures and the shooting of a number of Texas criminals. He was officially credited with 53 kills and suffered 17 wounds himself. Starting on February 10, 1934, Hamer constantly shadowed Barrow and Parker, living out of his car just a town or two behind them. By May 1934, Barrow had 16 warrants for robbery, auto theft, escape, assault, and murder in 4 states. Hamer studied the gang's movements and found that they swung in a circle skirting the edges of 5 Midwestern states, exploiting the state line rule which prevented officers from pursuing a fugitive into another jurisdiction. Because Barrow was consistent in his movements, Hamer charted his path and predicted where he would go. Finally, after 102 days, he got a solid tip that Bonnie and Clyde would be driving down a rural road near Gippsland, Louisiana, and set up an ambush. The posse that gunned down Bonnie and Clyde were composed of these 6 men. In the front row, left to right, are Texas lawman Bob Alcorn, Louisiana officer Henderson Jordan, and Texas officer Frank Hamer. Standing in the back are Dallas Deputy Sheriff Ted Henton, Louisiana Deputy Sheriff Prentice Oakley, and Texas lawman Maney Gault. On the morning of May 23, 1934, Clyde stopped his car at the ambush site. He and Bonnie were immediately riddled with a fusillade of about 150 bullets. It was law enforcement overkill, but the posse wasn't about to take their chances given how well armed the couple was in the past. Frank's buried right there, Billy's buried right there, and his wife Gladys is buried right here. She has a very interesting story. Gladys Johnson married 21-year-old Ed Sims. Her father set up Gladys and Ed on his ranch. They had 2 daughters,
but Gladys was headstrong and willful. Ed drank too much, and both sought affections outside of their marriage. Had a nasty divorce. Gladys moved her girls in with their father's luxurious ranch house, where she soon fell in love with Frank Hamer, who was working on that ranch. When Ed tried to take his daughters for a prearranged Christmas visit in 1916, Gladys and her brother Sid shot him dead on the Snyder Square, teeming with shoppers. She was actually acquitted of the charges.
In 1917, Frank Hamer married Gladys Johnson Sims. On October 1st, 1917, Hamer and Gladys and some relatives were at a gas station when they came across the deceased Ed Sims' brother-in-law, Gus McMeans, a former Texas Ranger and sheriff of the county. A shootout erupted between Hamer's party and that of McMeans, and as Hamer and McMeans were clinched in a grapple, the latter was shot in the heart and killed. Hamer was wounded but survived and made a complete recovery. When the gun smoke cleared and the cops arrived, they collected 2 semi-automatic pistols, 3 rifles, and 7 revolvers from the parties. Soon after he recovered, Hamer became a federal prohibition agent and took part in numerous raids and shootouts against bootleggers. This is the grave of Hamer's son, who died as a war hero during World War II. Billy Beckham Hamer was killed in action on Iwo Jima when the 9th Marines, 3rd Marine Division stormed the island on March 7, 1945.
Now there's another aspect to the life of Frank Hamer. As a Texas Ranger, he was hired by Coke Stevenson to challenge the results of the 1948 senatorial election. Lyndon Johnson was running against Coke Stevenson, and there was a number of ballots that suddenly appeared in the town of Alice, Texas, and everybody pretty much today knows that Lyndon Johnson stole that election by 78 votes by finding what was called ballot box 13. Almost all of the ballots in there were marked for Lyndon Johnson, and it put him over Coke Stevenson. Well, Stevenson hired Frank Hamer to go down there and look into shenanigans, but apparently Johnson had such control over some judges down there that they would not overturn the results of the election. Voter fraud does happen. It happened in 1948, and I don't know anybody that doesn't believe that it didn't happen. So Lyndon Johnson basically entered the U.S. Senate by stolen votes. I'm sure Frank Hamer believed in that as well.
After putting an end to Bonnie and Clyde, Hamer worked as the head of private security for oil and shipping companies, then rejoined the Texas Rangers in 1948. He retired for the last time in 1949, suffered a heat stroke in 1953, and lingered in poor health until he passed away in Austin in 1955.
So if you are a fan of The Highwayman, it's a recent movie with Kevin Costner and Woody Harrelson. Woody Harrelson plays Ben Gault in the film, and I enjoy the film. And here is the grave of Ben Maney Gault. As you can see, a number of police agencies have been here to place mementos. Some bullets there. Looks like some emblems. One's from Lancaster Police Department in Texas. This one looks like it's from New York. This one looks like it's from Daytown Police. Whoops. And looks like they put quarters in there to keep these from falling down. And there's a Texas Rangers badge right there. So, as you can see, they are remembered quite well. Maney Gault was born in 1886 and he died in 1947. Captain in the Texas Rangers. And also his marker here for the Texas Rangers. He was a close associate of Frank Hamer and was by his side when 4 other law enforcement officers ambushed Bonnie and Clyde. Gault was pretty tight-lipped about the subject. He didn't like to talk about it. He quietly served out the remainder of his years as captain of the Rangers Company C Division. He died in relative anonymity in December 1947. Right here next to Maney Gault is his wife, Rebecca Johnson Gault. She died in 1955. She is here as well. It's very fascinating that so many people have sought this grave out and put bullets and police emblems on there. We also have one from the New York Police Department. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed hearing about these two. Now I want to find the grave of a Hollywood actor who's buried here as well, Zachary Scott. and a very prolific author by the name of James Michener. You may have read some of his books, but you also may have seen some movies that were based on the books that he wrote.
Here in this wooded area is the grave of Austin doctor Zachary Scott and his wife Sally Masterson, who were the parents of actor Zachary Scott. Today he's pretty much a forgotten Hollywood actor. He was born in Austin in 1914 and had his sights on becoming a doctor like his dad, but eventually gravitated towards stage acting and later shifted to movies and TV. While in stage drama, he met his first wife, Elaine Anderson. After they divorced in 1950, she became the wife of author John Steinbeck. Scott's first movie role came in 1944. A year later, he was cast in Mildred Pierce and received acclaim for his duplicitous performance as the lover of both Joan Crawford and her daughter.
And just what do you do, Mr. Berrigan?
I loaf, in a decorative and highly charming manner.
Is that all?
With me, loafing is a science. You're very beautiful like that.
I bet you said
His
it all
mysterious
just-
murder in that film forms the basis of the plot.
Can you?
Scott also supported Ann Sheridan in the 1947 film The Unfaithful, and later that year, Ronald Reagan and Alexis Smith in The Stallion Road. MGM borrowed him to support Lana Turner and Spencer Tracy in Cass Timberlane, 1947. He was also involved in a number of TV roles. Scott and his second wife, actress Ruth Ford, had a child together, and he also adopted her daughter from a previous marriage. Scott's last roles were in 1962 when he appeared with Jerry Lewis in It's Only Money and the TV movie The Expendables. He returned to Broadway for A Rainy Day in Newark, 1963. He then moved back to Austin. Scott died on October 3, 1965, from a cancerous brain tumor at the home of his mother in Austin. He was 51 years old.
I got in my car and drove over here to another side of the cemetery, and it wasn't very hard to find the grave of James Michener and his wife Maury. They're located here right next to the road. It's kind of interesting being a newspaper editor. I once got a publicity still which showed James and Maury on a cruise. It was some kind of press release for a cruise, and it was such a nice picture. I sent it to James Michener and I asked both of them to sign it, and they did. I still have it. Mrs. Michener wrote me a letter saying, hey, if you have a copy of this picture, can you send us one? Well, I didn't, and therefore they didn't get a copy of it. He also acquiesced to an autograph request that he handwrite out something, and so he wrote out this thing saying, drink 6 glasses of water a day, and if you have no water, then beer will do. I probably slaughtered that, but that's basically what he said in the quote, and I still have that. He wrote that out by hand. I kind of feel a personal connection to these two here. James Albert Michener from 1907 to 1997, traveler, citizen, writer. And then Maury, his Japanese wife, Maury Sabasawa, 1920 to 1994, philanthropist, art lover, and wife. As you can see, there was 13 years difference between them. Right above their grave here is a set of chimes that have been going off.
Born in 1907, James A. Michener was adopted as an infant by a widow in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. His mother and aunt valued books and education, and young Michener immersed himself in the novels of 19th century masters. Reading fed his wanderlust, and as a teenager he hitchhiked from coast to coast. The great variety of odd jobs and experiences that followed formed an important part of his early education. He traveled across the land by boxcar, worked in carnival shows, and before he was 20 years old had visited all but 3 of the states. After college, he became a teacher and edited textbooks, a position that was interrupted by World War II when Michener joined the Navy. From his wartime experiences in the Solomon Islands came his first book, The Tales of the South Pacific, which won a Pulitzer Prize in 1947. Rodgers and Hammerstein adopted the story into the musical South Pacific that ran on Broadway. In 1949, he took up residence in Honolulu, Hawaii, and became actively involved in civic affairs there. 10 years later, his novel Hawaii was published and became an immediate bestseller. Over his lifetime, he published more than 4 dozen books, printed in virtually every language, with sales running into the millions. Most of Michener's works are historical novels, all distinguished by the thorough research which was his hallmark. Among these are Sayonara, The Source, Centennial, Chesapeake, The Covenant, Space, Poland, Texas, and Alaska. In 1962, Michener ran for Congress as a liberal Democrat, but lost in a decidedly conservative district. From 1979 to 1983, he was a member of the Advisory Council to NASA, an experience which solidified his interest in the field.
So after hunting quite a while in this cemetery, I found the grave of Bobbie Lee Nelson. It's under the Fletcher marker. Bobbie Lee Nelson is the sister of Willie Nelson, the singer. She passed away earlier this year, March 10th, 2022. She's buried next to her son, who died in 1989 at a young age. Now, she was the older sister of Willie Nelson and a member of his band, Willie Nelson and Family. Her grandmother taught her to play the keyboard at age 5 with the pump organ, and after successful appearances at gospel conventions held in Hillsboro, Texas, her grandfather bought her a piano. She started singing in school acts and in church with her brother. At 16, she married Bud Fletcher, who formed his own band, the Texans. She joined on the piano while her brother joined in on vocals and guitar. The band was disassembled in 1955 after she divorced Fletcher. In 1965, she moved to Nashville, Tennessee. After a third marriage failed, she played restaurants and different venues until she was called by her brother from New York in 1973 for a session. She joined Willie on the piano during the session, and Atlantic Records that produced The Troublemaker, Shotgun Willie, and Phases and Stages. The same year, she joined her family full-time and began touring with her brother.
So that's it. We're running out of time. We thank you for joining us on this episode of History Hunters. We hope that you enjoyed learning a little bit more about the folks buried in the Austin Memorial Park here in Austin, Texas.